Okay, I'm ready.
Good morning and welcome to 10-Minute Mondays. Today I am excited to interview Nick Hance of Reenhanced, who happens to be my business partner and my husband, and somebody who has created 2 custom connectors for Power Automate and gone through the Microsoft certification process. So I thought it would be really interesting to talk to Nick about what he's done and Power Automate and what it's like to build a connector. So Nick, the first question that I would love to ask you is what are the connectors that you've made so far? What do they do?
Well, there was two, and the first one is the Gravity Forms Power Automate add-on. And what that does is it allows you to work with Gravity Forms, which is a form library for WordPress. So WordPress is the world's most popular open source software, and Gravity Forms is a popular platform that you use to make forms on it. This brings Power Automate to it, so you can trigger flows from any form you create in Gravity Forms.
Awesome. And what's the second one?
The second one is Power Form 7, which is similar in that it works with forms from WordPress, but it works with Contact Form 7, which is the world's most popular plugin for WordPress, according to the WordPress plugins directory. There's over 5 million installs, but there's no connectors to Power Automate. The connector is in certification now and will be up shortly, probably maybe even this week. But this one's really cool because we've taken everything that we've learned from the Gravity Forms Power Automate add-on, we've enhanced it and made it better. So not only can you trigger your flows from Contact Form 7, so someone fills out the contact form on your website, they can, you can power your flows from that. You can actually run the process in reverse. So you can have a flow that triggers or submits a Contact 7 form on your website. So it's kind of neat because now you can be even more creative with flow and Power Automate and do some really cool things with it.
Awesome. So I know at Reenhanced we try to stay really dialed into Power Automate connectors. What are there, 412 now? 418?
421 as of this morning.
421. So 421 connectors, which represent the realm of business automation and personal automation capabilities. So why forms? Why did you decide to focus on Gravity Forms and Contact Form 7?
Well, you can do all of these cool things with Power Automate, but it all starts from somewhere. And really the most valuable things you can have are the connectors, or I'm sorry, the triggers. So it's what you use to start a flow. And many businesses, their workflows come to, hey, we have a website and we have a form on it, and we need it to go into Dynamics, or we need it to do, X, Y, or Z. And that's what this is doing. It brings that ability to use Power Automate, which is something that most companies already have licensing for, and then do the automation right on top of it. So Contact Form 7, I'm really excited, is now able to be used with Power Automate.
Very cool. So I know I have interviewed other people who have built custom connectors. And one question that we've asked them, which I think is really interesting, is what did you learn through the Microsoft certification process? Do you have any tidbits or anything you've learned that you might want to pass along to somebody else interested in doing that?
We've got a unique view of it because we're working on software that we didn't initially create. We're working with open source software, so there's many authors for these products that we work with. There are some significant legal things that you need to step through to do that, so that is something that's to keep in mind. But at the same time, it's all built on top of the Open API spec, which is something that you use to basically describe how your API works. That's built with some Microsoft extensions on it that their documentation doesn't do a great job of covering. So I learned after doing this multiple times how to do the dynamic stuff with it, where you can see on the screen here, you have the drop down and it gives you a selection. That's actually hitting the API on the back end, getting a list of all of the WordPress sites, and then getting a list of contact forms specific to the site you'd already selected. And then once that's done, it actually pulls in all the fields which is through a dynamic schema. So I've explained all of this in a blog post because I struggled with it, and I think others might too. So I'm hoping that by putting this out here, others can see this and figure out how to go for it or go through it pretty easily.
Yeah, this is a great blog. So obviously I knew we were going to be talking about the connectors, which is why I kind of had these ready to go here. So what if someone listening right now or watching this recording later on the YouTube channel, what if they want to get started on this? What's your number one tip for them?
You're going to have to learn Open API, and it's all through something called Swagger. So it's using an older version. There's Swagger version 3 and Swagger version 2, but this is a Swagger version 2, and it has some specific Microsoft extensions built on top of it. This blog post is going to help you to do some of this customized drop-down stuff. The way that this connector works, it's actually a 3-part connector. You need to know your license key so we can identify the account. You need to know which site you're working with because you're licensed on multiple sites, and then you'll need to know which form. So there's actually 3 parts that you need to know before you can do any action via, submitting a form or having a trigger work. So I've gone through the beginning part of this, which is really just how do I identify those 3 items, but it doesn't. I didn't get into the dynamic part of it where when you build a contact form using contact form 7 or on Gravity Forms, you're able to drag and drop that thing and create your form all entirely on the WordPress side. The connectors that we've built are intelligent enough that it lets the owners of these systems kind of manage all that within WordPress without having to think about it in the connector. The connector just works automatically, which if you're building these things and you own an API, you should probably leave it so that that knowledge is properly separated. You don't want to have it tied so that your connector then becomes a bottleneck. You want to keep it really separate and really fluid so that you can keep everything on one side where all the business logic goes in, have it flow through your connector and have that be intelligent enough to just work, and then have the flows on the other side visually represent what it is you're working with.
Cool. Now, I am not a technical person, so I appreciate all of the work that goes into this. But as a user and somebody who creates flows in Power Automate, I love when a flow has a trigger. And I've noticed most of the newer connectors that come in generally start out with an action or a handful of actions and no triggers, or maybe 1 trigger. From a building standpoint, a trigger is harder to build than actions, depend on the API you're using.
They're harder because it works through what's known as a webhook. So on the front end, when you're using flows, it's like, oh, cool, I can just use this. But what's actually happening is that when you're interacting with the server and you build a trigger, that trigger happens from the end side. So from the side that's not connected to Power Automate. So in our example, you have your contact form 7 or the Power Form 7 thing. And what happens is that there's a little piece of data that stays inside the WordPress site that basically stores the webhook URL. So when you then are, you can configure your forms, but it's up to the WordPress side, the contact form 7 side, to send that data off to Power Automate. So in order to build a trigger, you have to have that server side that client side be smart enough to send it up to Azure for the Power Automate to kick off. So that's why they're a little bit harder, because there's some implementation that needs to happen there. And they're very, very picky about how you build these things. So you need to extend your API so that it builds in this webhook stuff. And then you also need to have the ability to delete those things. So if you were to turn off a flow or if you delete a flow inside of your account, it actually reaches out and says, hey, turn this thing off so that it's not having all these requests come from all over the internet for dead flows. So you have to build both of those in order to do it.
I think that explains why there are so many more connectors that are action-based.
They're a lot easier to build, yeah.
Cool. So we are actually up in time, but I have one last question. What are you working on next? Are you going to keep building connectors or just let these 2 run for a while?
We've got some more in the works. We've actually started on the next one, and it's for another popular open source software. We think that we're bringing a lot to the world here by just building these connectors out and making it so you don't have to figure out all the technical stuff. If you're using open source software internally, you can start to use these connectors, and it will make your job really easy to automate cool things on your WordPress or other popular open source software systems.
Cool. That's nice. Thanks, Nick. If anyone is watching this and they have questions on getting started, do you want to share any contact info they can reach out to you?
Oh yeah, you can Twitter at Nhance or GitHub at Nhance, or you can email me directly, nhance@reenhanced.com.
Awesome. Thank you, Nick, for your time, and good luck
Yeah.
with your Power Automate connectors.
Oh, thanks, Heidi. Thanks for the interview.
Thanks. Bye.
All right.